And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. My apologies. We had a couple of technical glitches there for just a second, but I think we're here now. I am Hank Garner, your host, as always, and today I'm super excited to have Brent Weeks on the show with me. Brent, it's been a couple of years since we got a chance to chat, but got a brand new book out just a couple of weeks ago, and what a better time to get to catch up than over a new book. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. As you said, it's been a couple of years. It takes me a couple of years. I tend to write these big chunky fantasy novels, and I keep promising myself I'm going to write shorter books, and I'm going to write a shorter book, and never happens. So it's been a couple of years since I had an excuse, but thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Is that lying to yourself? What do you call that when you keep promising yourself to write shorter books? And
just I'm just a slow learner. I think it's like I told myself I was going to write this book. I think part of it is because after finishing a big project, which most of my projects are big, I always go, you know what? Let's bite off something a little smaller, because that was rough. That was hard to do. Let's do something easy next. And then I think, well, I'll do a shorter book, and that will, makes editing and everything like take half as long when the book is only half as long, and takes the writing about half as long. And so that sounds like almost like a vacation. It's like, okay, I'll do what I love, but it'll be easy this time. And this time I'd really fooled myself. I had a bet with John Scalzi, and because he years ago he asked what I was doing once I was done with Lightbringer, and I said, I'm gonna go back to the Night Angel world, and I'm gonna write a short book, and he just laughed at me, and he's like, no, you won't. You epic fantasy guys, you never go back. And I was like, yes, we do. I'm like, I'm a very disciplined artist, and I can if I take on that challenge, I will make a shorter book. So he's like, okay, how short? And I'm like, oh crap. So 125,000 words, and he's like, yeah, so the average novel, length is like 80,000 words, but okay, fine. 125,000 words is short. And so he said, okay, so let's make a bet on it. So we both ponied up, as much as we could manage. And that was $5. And so I've been having this voice of John Scalzi mocking me in my head for the last 2+ years, and I'm having to give him his $5, unfortunately, because I just barely scraped over the 125,000 words with 315. So
I was about to say, Night Angel Nemesis is considerably longer than the first trilogy.
Yes.
What was the average size of those first 3 books?
So those were 155,000. It just happened that way. I wasn't aiming for that exact word count. And then 170,000 for the last one. So yes, this one was more than double the first 2 Night Angel books, and so that's why it took a little while. I still have a pretty good writing speed. It's just the total length is large. Right. I even had a space in the middle where there's a mid-book pinch, and I tend to think of these things, one, structurally, of having action sequences and way to fit the structure together, but also I know that they split the books in certain languages. So when this goes into German, they always split the books because German adds 30% to the length. And so when you get a book that's 400,000 words, it's like they just can't, like, literally it won't physically be bound without just breaking. So they tend to split longer books. Plus they just can't make any money on these monsters. So I knew that they'd be splitting the book. So I was like, okay, well, I have this place. Okay, right. It's at about 150, and that's a reasonable book size. And I was like, I sort of think it's one full book. I think it should be together, but I know the Germans are going to split it. So I sort of presented it to my agent and my editor, and they're both like, no, I think it's one book. It needs to be one book. So I appreciated that from them, because I felt like that showed some artistic integrity, which is not a thing that people expect out of New York, out of big businesses, which publishing is, kind of a big business. So I like that. I like that they did that they went with, they're like, well, this feels like a whole story. This has got an artistic unity. Let's keep it together. And so that's what we did.
Writing is the strange mix of artistry and commerce, and the commerce allows us to be involved in the artistry, and it's this yin and the yang, the push and the pull of making it all work together. And anyone who can pull it off and still have their soul at the end of the day, I think that's a pretty good accomplishment.
It is. And we had a lot of conversations about how do we like first it was just like, well, how do I write this book? And I wanted to do new things. And it was like, okay, I don't want to write the same book over and over. That's just not who I am as an artist. I want to take on new challenges. I had this long-term vision after I wrote Night Angel of like stories I wanted to tell in this world and how it all hooked together. But I didn't want to make promises because I was like, okay, I'm a first-time writer with Night Angel. I don't want to make these huge promises about, a 12-book series or something right out of the gate. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So, so I wrote, I knew that what I wanted to write in the Night Angel world, I wasn't ready for yet as an artist. I was just like, I don't have all the skills to do what I want to do in a way that's new and fresh and that feels like me rather than feels like somebody else or, copying some other epic fantasy writers or whatever. So I said, I need to go write Lightbringer first and sort of cross train. And so having done that, coming back to this world, it's like, okay, now I want to write a novel with Kyler Stern as the main character. So he is the main character in the Night Angel trilogy. I want to continue the story on. Well, now how do we sell this? Like, it's like, okay, it's one thing to tell the story. I decided to write it in first person, present tense. Much of it is in present tense. Eventually there's a frame story that gets introduced, and I do some of these slightly more literary things that I introduce kind of slowly enough, I think, that you can kind of figure out what's going on if you haven't read books very much that have those sort of things. But it was sort of like, okay, so I've got this book that's different, but has some of the same characters. And now how do we introduce that to readers? And we had some conversations about that. It's like, okay, is this Night Angel 4? It's like, well, I don't think it's exactly Night Angel 4. It's pretty different, even though it is Kyler Stern. And so we decided to sort of roll out a little bit of the master plan, which is, okay, so what I'm writing now, and so I've just been telling fans this, kind of now in the last few weeks and whatever, is the Kakari Codex is the whole series. And so the first movement of the Kakari Codex was the Night Angel Trilogy. And that's a trilogy. It stands by itself, it stands alone. Like there's a finish to the story and you can be done there. Like, and
obviously even book 1 could stand on its own.
Yes, which was very deliberate. I really wanted to, like, I felt as a reader, I felt sometimes trapped into epic fantasy series. Like, okay, that book sucked, but I liked some of the earlier books, but I need to see how it ends. And that's not the deal that I want any fan to have from my work. It's like, well, that book sucked, but I guess I'm stuck. It's like, no, like the whole point is I give you good story. You give me enough money, I can keep telling you good stories. That's kind of the, like, everybody is supposed to win in this thing, or at least I want fans to feel like, man, I got so much entertainment out of what I bought from Brent Weeks. Like, that was a great deal for me. Like, I really enjoyed that. So I did that with the first Night Angel book, and then I did it with the Night Angel, trilogy. And then so the way we're conceptually doing this is that this is the second, movement in the Kakari Codex, and this is the Kyler Chronicles. And then there will be a third movement, which will shift again and will shift focus. And I'm trying to not sell that yet, because that's a little ways down the road. and again, I don't want to overpromise. I want people to be blown away when we get there. That, yes, I've been working on these things. I've had some plot twists in mind since I was 20 years old, and here I am, 25, and I'm still not, here I'm 25. Sorry. Here I am, 46, 25 years later. And and I'm still not going to get to write some of those plot twists for a while. So it's sort of like there is this, in some ways, there is this grand plan, but I also want to leave room for myself as an artist to tell things in new ways, to do new things, and to teach readers. Okay, I just don't spin out the same book over and over. So I hope they'll come along with me. This is a tonal shift and a different way of telling a story that might take a little bit of getting used to. So that's it. Okay, we've got questions coming in. That's great.
Samuel said, "How many books do you plan to write in the Codex? I know you have a grand vision, but do you have a plan for that vision?"
Yeah. So this is loose. So I'm trying not to, like, even when I was talking with my editor, because with Lightbringer, I'd planned to write a trilogy.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
And then right before it came out, I was like, okay, don't put trilogy on, put series on it, because I think it's going to be 4 books. And they did that in the US.
Yeah.
But in the UK, they never got the memo. So it says, the first book says trilogy. And so I've been living that down forever. So, and then of course it went from 4 to 5. So,
right.
In this, I said, well, we could call this, that they wanted Kyler Chronicles for the second installment here. And I was like, okay, I think it's only going to be 3. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 3. That's how I envision this second movement. And they're like, yeah, let's not put trilogy on that, just in case. But what I envision is 3 for the Night Angel Trilogy, 3 for this. I envision the last series will be longer. So it would not surprise me if that's 4 or 5. But however, like I also like when I finished the Lightbringer series, I had this thought. I was like, this is incredibly difficult to do, to finish a series, to like the amount of just intellectual effort it takes to pull together all the threads. It's like taking the SAT every day for 3 or 4 years, 3 years. And it's like, that's not fun to do, just to make the storylines line up, to make sure that all of the plots, the subplots that you happily introduced 9 years ago, that those actually matter, that each character has an impact on the final outcome, that you've dealt with everything that you raised in ways that look organic or feel, etc. Like it's super, super hard. And I was like, I don't want to be doing that at 70. Like I don't want to get into a place where I'm trying to do this stuff that you need 110% of your brain capacity and your fluid intelligence to do when I'm old. And like, I got a lot of crystallized intelligence. I've got a lot of knowledge, but like that thing of like flipping things backwards and being like, if you flip this upside down and stick it together, that works, like people do their best mathematical sort of things when they're young. It's like, I think there's some of that's that fluid intelligence that you need for certain things, to bring things artfully together, that like, man, I would like to not be doing some of that stuff when I'm 70 with a huge series. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm not biting off more than I can chew, so that I end on really on a high note, so that I can, do what I'm setting out to do, I guess.
I think I'm one of 3 people on Earth who came to your work through the Lightbringer series and then discovered the Night Angel series. And the way that I would sell Lightbringer to people is I would tell them it's epic fantasy, but if Green Lantern was in this world, kinda, and then that would open up a whole conversation where we could really talk about the series.
Sure.
And that I just love that series so much, and my son and I bonded over that series, and he's now 19 and in college, and we love the series together. But then I between books 3 and 4, as you were publishing Lightbringer, I think I went and read the Night Angel trilogy, the original trilogy, and I love that this series, but they are very different series, and I remember when I first met you, you had mentioned that you were going to go back to the Night Angel world because you had more stories there that you wanted to tell. What is it about this world that you've now returned to that kept pulling on you to come back and tell more stories there?
Oh, I mean, in many ways, it's just like your first love. It's like you never forget you never forget it. And so there's like, I wondered when I came back, I was like, okay, how is this going to be? And I had a scene that I like, one of the first scenes I tried to write. I had this character, Mama Kay, from the original Night Angel trilogy, and I was like, okay, well, let's see if I can find her. You know, is she still in here somewhere? And I wrote the scene, and it was like, oh, she's right there. Like it was like, oh, it's like seeing an old friend, you know, from college or something, and you're like, there's no time has passed. You're like, you're still there, and we still know each other, and okay, we can get along again. So like there was certainly some of that. There was like, I love these characters. I'd had these plans. I had plans for some of them, that like, okay, I'm going to see what happens to you when we do this. I'd had other things where I was like, okay, you have a big test coming, and I'm not really sure how that's going to go for you. And like, I'm not sure what the truth of the situation and your character, by the time you get to that test, how it's gonna shake out. So like, I want to see how you do there. And maybe you're going to break my heart, or maybe you're going to surprise me and be amazing. So I set up, I have these strong character arcs, and I have these sort of tentative character arcs in my head. And I have these big trials for characters. And I like want to see how we get there, because they have, like, characters, not often, but like sometimes they really do surprise me. I mean, like, well, I guess sometimes they surprise me in big ways. They're frequently surprising me in small ways, where it's just like, okay, I wanted this scene to go this way, but that doesn't fit with who she is.
Right.
I was going to have her ask about this thing, but like, she's not going to ask that of Kyler, because she doesn't trust that he's going to tell her the truth. So she's not even going to ask. And it's like, well, dang it. The whole point was that Kyler gets to say this thing. So then, then you're juggling, and the depth of character and characters remain true to themselves. It's always something that's really, really important to me, and something I pride myself on and do a lot of work on. So I, gosh dang it, I got lost in the weeds there on your original question. So you got to forgive me.
Well, I was the original question was, what was it about this world that pulled?
I guess some of that was that discovery. It's that hope to be with these characters, to take them to places that I'd sort of thought I would be done with by now. Like, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this Lightbringer thing, and then I'll, surely by the time I'm 45, I will have written this big long series set in the Night Angel world, and then I'll be looking for something else to do. And now it's like, well, I've just left these guys hanging. Like they've got stuff. There's work left undone for these people. I know who some of these people's kids are, and how the kids partially turn out. So there's things like that of like, I need to see you. I need to do this thing. And there's things about the Night Angel world that are like, I took some hard left turns when I decided to write Lightbringer. I was like, I don't want to write the same kind of thing over and over. So let's start with some very different world building blocks as I was building Lightbringer. It's like, okay, we're not starting in the streets. We're starting in the courts. We're not starting with very low magic. We're starting high magic. Like, magic affects everything in this world. We're starting in a different time period. The technology and everything is in a different place. It's an early Renaissance world. There's guns and magic together, and guns and swords and magic together, which is awesome. But this world is more, rudimentary, and there's less magic, and there's more, kind of grit under your teeth, because that's where the characters come from. And that's the kind of worlds that they've been dealing with. So there's something about that I've always loved, of just by being like, man, this world is tough. And so in Night Angel, it's like that, there's this huge sense of darkness a lot of times, but there's always this hope. There's this light within that I think is the brighter, because the reality and the truth of the darkness, and that, like, bad things can happen to good people. Like, that's acknowledged in this world, and you see it, and it takes a piece out of people, and people have to confront that. And like, we live in a world where people can just boom, get cancer and be dead 3 months later, and you're just like, what the hell? Why them? And Night Angel does that. And because of who the characters are and their jobs, they interact with death a lot. And like, those are really stark questions for us as human beings. And it's like, okay, wait, you use assassins you know, to talk about deep moral issues. It's like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Like that's why. It's because like they're dealing with death, and like so we want them to have special insights, and maybe they don't, and that's super scary. Oh, you know, it's in its own way. So it allowed me to ask kind of different questions, like than Lightbringer, which had questions about power and power structures and how people act when they're treated differently, and lots of that stuff that maybe is a little more immediate to some of us in a slightly more pampered lifestyle, like perhaps some of us kind of live. Where Night Angel is much more like, man, you got it. What are you going to do to survive today? And it might surprise you. So it's like visiting that old neighborhood in my memory. So
it's so interesting to me, the way that fantasy in particular allows you to wrestle with ideas and things going on in our real world, but to do it in a way that is removed from the things we're so attached to in the world, and in a lot of ways allows you to see the truth of a thing without being immersed in it, if that makes sense at all. It's like wrestling through an idea without being without everything counting so much for you in particular. Do you think of fantasy?
That's actually one of the things I really, really love about fantasy is it allows us to wrestle with these questions again without our tribalism, right? Like, okay, if you're an American, you're watching this in 2023, you know where you line up, or people like you line up on like 50 different subjects. And you're like, well, people like me seem to think that this free trade issue should be put in these terms. And that's just how you're going to do it, because that's how people like you do it, whether you've thought it through for yourself or not. And fantasy kind of says, or like reading as a whole says, come here, I'm going to pull you out of your world. I'm going to plug you into a new world, and you're going to look at it through these eyes, and you're going to see things in ways maybe you never thought. And you read an old book and you're like, wow, people are completely blind to some of these, you know, racial issues or whatever, but they really care about honor or something. And you're like, when's the last time I heard somebody talk about honor when they weren't making a joke?
Right.
You know, it's like, wait, but they're really serious about this. This is not a, like, wow, like I've stepped into a new world. And in some ways, I think that breaks us out of a little tyranny of our own time. And it lets us, it lets, and a tyranny of our own groups of like, well, I have to think this because everybody that I know thinks this, and everybody who's not evil thinks this about this issue. And it puts us in somebody else's head, and it says, what if things were set up like this? And then what would you think? And this character does this thing. He thinks it's right. You can think differently, even as that character makes like these horrible choices. Like, I invite you to like one of the things I did with the original Night Angel trilogy was there's a really good character who's done good things and paid the price for it. And then in the third book, he slides into evil, and he does it by rational steps. And I was hoping that as he does that, like at different points, readers would pull away from him and be like, wait, I think he's a bad guy now, or at least he's doing stuff that I'm really deeply uncomfortable with. And then I hoped that some readers would reread and be surprised. Like, wait, I was okay when he was massacring people just by his orders off stage. But then when he indulged in sexual violence on stage, that's when I gave up on him. Wait, right. Hold on. That makes me, and like, I was actually excusing him because he was my friend, right? Like, I was like, no, it's okay. He's doing it. He feels bad about it, and he's really trapped. Like, I was excusing evil because that was a guy I felt good things about. And that should kind of horrify you as a reader. And like, I want to set those things up. I want to do that. And like, that's one of the powers of fantasy in particular, is I think fantasy pulls you the farthest from your own tribe, and it puts you into a completely new world, and it trusts you, and it says, okay, be a moral human while you read these people doing things, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, and then step away from it and go, gosh, how do I feel about that? What do I think about that? You know, as an individual, maybe I need to go talk to somebody about that, because that made me think about things really differently. Like one of the all-time great reviews that I stumbled across was just some Amazon review, and this guy said, I feel like this book is deeply subversive, but I don't yet know how. and I just love that. It was like, wait, this book is making me think. Like, I read a book about ninjas, and it's changing me somehow, or making me think in different ways that I haven't developed those muscles yet.
Right.
And I love doing that for people. I love being like, yeah, it's a story about, ninjas and killers and prostitutes and people who make horrible choices, and yet maybe it's got something to say to you if you've got ears to hear. So that's fun for me.
My wife and I have this this thing that we'll do. We'll watch TV together, and we say that the writer needs you to care about a character, and then you take that character, stick them in a tree, and then set the tree on fire. And so we'll be watching a TV show, and they're like, well, they just set the tree on fire. So what I'm hearing from you is that you like to put the reader in that tree and then set the tree on fire.
Yes, that's great. I like that. I like that. I like that. That's okay. What are you gonna do now?
Yeah, right. Brent, when you first created this world of the Night Angel, was it the world that first appealed to you, or was it a particular character that then necessitated that the world form around them? Maybe it's a chicken or egg kind of question, but what came first for you?
Well, for the Night Angel trilogy, it was mostly the character came first, because I had from the time I was 19, I started writing my first fantasy novel,
right?
And I finally threw it away when I was 25 and was like, okay, I made some mistakes here. Also, it was about 220,000 words long, and I was about halfway done. And was like, okay, you cannot write a 400,000 word novel as your first novel and ever get published. I actually had a very hard time getting published with a 155,000 word novel. Like, people said, that's too long. I just don't love it enough. I'm going to pass. It's great, but it's too long for me. So I had written this novel, had some structural problems, so it'll never come out of the trunk. But this one character showed up in that novel, and he saves this girl, but not for her sake. He's just pissed off about something else. And then he kicks a bunch of people's asses, and then he leaves. And it was like, wait, who the hell was that guy? And so when I decided, wait, this guy he's a killer, but he's got some kind of a code. He doesn't really care about her exactly. He cares that other people are violating what he thinks is right, but he doesn't really explain what that is. And then he's just gone. And I was like, okay, I got to throw away this novel. What if I didn't throw away everything I've done? What if sort of the main events of this novel still happen? They're just 20 years in the future. So let's rewind the clock, take this character, figure out where he came from and what he did. And so it's like, okay, well, there's this town that they mentioned that's like the worst town, and crime is totally rampant in that town. So that's scenario. Okay, let's. I bet he grew up there. Because how do you get like my main problem was how do you get a moral assassin, a moral killer? And my answer to that was, well, you'd have to have a kid in such a bad situation that it seems like a logical decision for him to take this horrible road out. Like, all the other ways out for him are worse. And that's the only way I could see that happening. And then, of course, what does it do to somebody if they're a moral person and they're trying to be an assassin? It's like, well, that's going to cause them all sorts of problems. So it was that process of rewinding the clock by 20 years, moving to a different city, a different part of the world, and being like, okay, this city has to be fundamentally corrupt. All the things that we set up to take care of children, must be broken in this city, right? Because nobody's taking care of children. And okay, there's got to be crime. There's got to be all this. He's part of this group. Okay, so that was sort of the initial setup. Was I sort of already built a lot of the world, but the environs of the city and the structure of the city was this has to be the worst possible environment, where you have a basically good kid trying to survive in order to become what I wanted him to become, or what I had for him to become. So it was a lot about the character for this particular in this situation with Night Angel.
Samuel asked an interesting question, and I'm going to frame it a little differently than he said. But there have been um, some books recently with some problematic issues historically, culturally, and some of those have been updated. Much to, you know, much debate has gone on about whether you should change with cultural sensitivities, and there's a whole conversation to be had around that. But my question is, because you do write characters that are kind of morally gray and who maybe don't, and by your own words and by that Amazon review, your work can be a little subversive and intentionally so. Do you ever worry that some of the subversive nature of the stories you tell and some of the characters that you write and how they're kind of morally, all along the spectrum, and sometimes the same character is all over the
Right,
spectrum?
right.
Do you ever worry that those characters or those situations you write might be misconstrued, or maybe taken out of the context that you intend for them to be in? Maybe that's the
Sure.
best way
Yes.
to say that.
Well, in one way, I have the luxury of
Mhm.
writing to readers, which,
Yeah.
which I think raises the bar a little bit. Like I think there's things in the books, certainly in the initial books, in the initial Night Angel trilogy, that like I wouldn't put on screen, because there's a difference to seeing things than to
Sure.
hearing them described, and like how far back you pull the camera and stuff can be very different than the
Sure.
image itself. The image can just be searing. Because we are visual creatures.
Right.
Secondly, I think the audience is, even with your kind of crazy people, it's like you get book crazy people.
Oh,
At
yeah.
least they can read. They're
Right.
engaging with the word, and so I have tended to be like, I'm going to trust you guys, and there are going to be people who misread it. And there are
Mhm.
going to be people who, maybe misread it until they run into the right critic who says, no, that's not what he was saying. Like, I see my name next to stuff that Durzo Blint says, life is meaningless, Brent Weeks. When we take a life, we take nothing of value, Brent Weeks. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, a character of mine said that. And the
Yeah.
whole conflict of even the first book is life meaningless? Is this, just a contest? And like Durzo Blint's a total badass. But like, look at what it has done to his life to live this way.
Right.
It has
Right.
left him with nothing, and except being a badass, and he doesn't even like it. It's like, so like you can read it wrongly, and I can't, I can't spend all my time dumbing it down or excusing it, or like being like,
Right.
by the way, folks, I don't think this is good. Do like put little author notes. This is a bad choice. This
Right.
is an ambiguous choice. I have some reservations about it. If once you do that, you've stopped making art, and it's like you've stopped giving people something that they can engage with. It's like, okay, I'm not writing this to preschoolers. I'm not advocating, like even with the initial book, it's like, okay, how do we sell this book? Well, the most important relationship is between the master and apprentice. So you could put a master and apprentice, this leering, looming figure over this guy, but then it would look like a book for kids. And so
Right.
it's like, we didn't sell it that way. It's like, this is not a book for kids. It's a book with a kid in it, but it's not for children to read.
Right.
And I've heard from people, because it's been out for a while now, who read it at very early ages, and they said, "Well, I mostly went past all this stuff. Like I didn't notice the stuff
Yeah.
that was like later. I was like, wow, that's rough. I wouldn't have had it an 11-year-old read that." So a lot of people mercifully missed some of the stuff,
Yeah.
which I tried to write some of it euphemistically so that so that younger people might read it. But there is just a huge amount of like, man, I think you've got to trust people. You've got to trust
Right.
people to be like, you have a moral background, and like this should help you deal with that and work that through. And like this is like and that's where I tend to fall with rewriting those novels. It's like, racism is bad. Okay, yeah, we got that. Like
Right.
using certain kinds of language, that's bad, and they didn't they treated that differently, years ago. And
Right.
some of them, some words were always slurs, and some things have changed and they've been slurs at certain times. And sometimes people were very forward thinking to use language that now we'd say, oh, that's not okay to say. And it's like, well, for that time, that was incredibly liberal.
Right.
And it's like, oh, that requires extra education for you to know that. But it also requires some trust. It's like, you know what, like art is rough. You read, you step into this other world, and part of the stepping into it is that things have not been tweaked for our sensitivities. That is not a weakness of it. That is the strength of it. It's like, if you don't like going into another world, don't read books. Just don't. It's not for you. Go to the most mainstream PG Hollywood thing, and you will be coddled in a nice cloud of exactly what today values, and brought along and never challenged. And some people really do want that. And like, maybe there's certainly a time for comfort reads. There's certainly a time for comfort watches. There's times when you're like, man, I can't read something brutal right now. Look at the Amazon reviews. It's like, this one tore my heart out. And you just go,
yeah,
not for me right now. I can't handle that. My dad just died, whatever.
Right.
I'm not going to read a book about that. It's like, okay, yeah, that's great. But I think you really, I think you miss a lot of like, okay, if you want to slap a thing in the front of a book to say there's these problematic things in it, or there's this, it's like, okay, it doesn't get in the way too much. If the author was okay with it, it's like, okay, I wrote that in a way that I wouldn't write it. I wrote it 25 years ago. I'd write it differently today because things have shifted. Let's change it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I do think it's like a slippery slope. It's like, man, like Mark Twain, like reading Huck Finn. It's like, there's some offensive language in there, and that's the point.
You're right.
It's like, oh, like even to say it, it's like, but like he's saying it, he's saying like, are black people human? It's like, well, duh. And it's like, but for the time, for his readership, you have Huck Finn saying, well, to do what we obviously can see is the right thing means I'm going to go to hell. And he says, all right, then I'll go to hell. It's like Mark Twain is shaking you by the neck and saying,
right,
don't you see how messed up you are? You Christians think this kid is going to go to hell because he's helping a man. And it's like, well, like it should blow your mind. And like, I don't think anybody can miss it if they actually read it and go, wait, okay, I see that word. That flags things for me. I don't like people using that word. I mean, I have read stuff from earlier times and just been surprised when you're just like, whoa, that just showed up.
Right.
Like, and and then you got to figure out, like, is he using that to, okay, he only uses that when the bad guys are saying it. So is he sort of an enlightened guy who's saying it, and then and then in a different book it's like, oh, here he uses it all over the place.
Right.
Crap. And it makes you sort of feel like, that's too bad.
Yeah.
But you also go, okay, it was written in 1950. When the guy refers to homosexuals, he doesn't do it in a way we think is appropriate now. Well, does that ruin all of your enjoyment? And that's up to you. Maybe it does ruin all your enjoyment. But so I think art is complicated, and humanity is complicated, and societies change. And we all know that. So I think that's a self-education kind of thing rather than a.
Well, and like you said a minute ago, this is not 11th grade English class. You can pick up any book you want and read. It's not an assignment. And maybe this is not the right time for that book, but put it on the shelf. Maybe come back to it in a month when you're in a different headspace, and maybe you have a different experience with it.
Right.
Let's talk craft for just a minute, Brent. During the writing of Lightbringer, where the story grew in the telling, did that experience, or maybe not that experience in particular, maybe other writing experiences, has that changed the way that you physically write a story in your planning, your organizing, your editing? Do you still approach it the same way? Do you still use the same computer software, if we just want to get down to the nuts and bolts? Like, has anything changed for you in the way you approach the job that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think certainly think that the experience of having finished now 2 epic fantasy series with Night Angel and Lightbringer was really valuable to me. It's like, okay, why did that grow? It's like, well, that grew because I had lots of conflicts for lots and lots of characters. They weren't all set to the same things. It was like, oh, I want to see more of what this guy does. I want to see more of what this guy. I had lots of options and a big world that I didn't even get to explore all of it. You know, there's whole sections of the magic we didn't really touch because none of the characters had, you know, that ability. Oh, we haven't got into really any orange drafters. You know, it's like, okay, I'm not making up a character just to do that. Okay, well, I could have it. It's like, stop adding characters. Oh, we haven't gone to this part of the world. You know, like there's all these other things that I've made up, but I haven't shown you those yet. It's like, don't do that. Tell this story. Bring it down.
It became the Tom Clancy of epic fantasy.
Yes, it's
adding characters and subplots.
Yes. It's like I think everybody who writes epic fantasy, it's like they like adding characters. They like more characters. They're good at it. They're good enough to get people to keep reading through the middle books. They like middle books. They're good at middle books. And it's like, okay, that's a different skill set than tying it all together. And so I think having strong endpoints of like, okay, this book is going to get to here, and we're going to have, this is going to be the shape of this book. And I'm going to, so I outlined much more with this book than I've done actually for any book that I've ever written. Because I knew that I was taking on I was pushing the boundaries of certain forms. And I was like, okay, to do that, I need this strong spine so that as I'm playing these games, it's like we're still obviously moving forward. There's lots of flags about how our progress is going so that you feel like, okay, this story ends. I want there to be more. You know, I've left some characters in places where you're like, wait, what's going to be next? But at the same time, it's like, okay, the story has ended. Like there was a question and it has now been answered. And like having that for each volume and having that build obviously to a conclusion rather than having it slightly more open is something I learned. I think I've learned it successfully. And then there is just that, like, there's always more to tell. There's always new characters that pop into your head and you're like, I want to tell about this woman. Oh my gosh, she's got cancer and she's dealing with this thing, and the magic that she's using is killing her, but she's got to use it because it helps her do, you know, X, Y, and Z. And, you know, it's like, honey, you're in book 5. Bring it back. You know, it's like, right. but I've already got like so much with her. And then I think I can make her tie in. And it's like, okay. But when you do that, like the characters that people already love are going to get less and less screen time. Right. And you're, oh, okay. So figuring out that give and take between what readers are reading for and what they love and what you love because you've seen everything is I think an important sort of perspectival flexibility that you need to have. Like I think I can criticize gently. You know, Robert Jordan. He spends 200 pages with Bail Doman, the river merchant. And it's like, okay, well, the river merchant is able to show you a lot of land. And like, okay, so he can show you that. And he moves some characters around a couple times. But it's like, but I don't want 200 pages with Bail Doman, river merchant. I don't care. I just don't care as a reader. And it's like, oh, well, Robert Jordan loved that character because he got to do things with that character. And he lost sight of the difference between why are readers reading. And it's like, okay, I got 0 of Rand al'Thor in this book. And I'm angry. It's like, okay, you need to give me a little bit more than that. It's like, so holding like the shape of the novel in your head and being like, there are characters you're not going to see as much as you want of it, but that's for a reason. And I've got that reason in mind, and it's going to pay off. And holding like that give and take between reader and author. It's like, okay, am I giving you what you came here for, but also giving you what I want to tell? Like I think that's a valid thing. And I don't think it's like, oh, well, I'm an artist and I just get to do whatever I want. It's like, fine, then don't publish the books. If it's really just for you, then put it in your drawer and feel super satisfied at what a genius you are. And, you know, they can publish it when you're dead or something. It's like, no. We actually tell stories so that people receive them, I think.
Right. And it becomes, this thing that you've created becomes bigger than you. And even though you're the creator and these things all originated in your head and in your heart, they once you put them out to the world, they kind of become more than that. And it's very weird. And it's very weird for a lot of writers to come to that realization that this thing that is so close to and dear to you
Mhm.
becomes kind of a community thing, and
Right.
it's a weird thing that happens in writing that, once you turn it loose to the world, it takes on a life of its own.
Absolutely. I think there's like, I've been thinking about like why do we allow writers? And there was this time in Western, civilization where people sort of said like, why do we let people tell us lies? It's like these are lies. Like none of this is true. And writers joke, "Oh, I'm a professional liar." It's like, why do we allow that? And the reason that they ultimately, the Puritans banned theater from the stage for a while Shakespeare was writing. It's like Cromwell came in and it's like you guys can't do this. This is lies. Period. And Shakespeare went off and he wrote some poems. He did all right. So
Yeah.
he was okay. Turned out he could write poetry too, jerk.
Right.
But the reason why we allow writers to tell lies is we do it to tell the truth. And so I think when you pull people out of their world and you put them into some other character who they have nothing in common with, it's like somehow that casts light, if it's done well and it's done honestly and it's done in a real way, on their own lives in ways that are kind of mystical. And it's amazing like that actually helps people, having people tell you helped me, your books helped me through a really dark time in my life. It's like, why did that happen? Well, it's because Night Angel is set in a really dark universe and yet there's hope. And it's like, okay, so that little core of hope, they were able to say, this guy's honest, like crap happens and sometimes we don't know why.
Yeah.
And we can all acknowledge that truth and not explain it away and say, oh, there's a greater purpose, there's a greater plan, it's all going to be fine, which is what we tend to do. And especially Americans tend to be very optimistic and like, it's going to be great, it's going to be fine, you're going to come out of this stronger than ever. And it's like, no, it just sucks sometimes. Or maybe you'll come out of it stronger than ever, 30 years from now. But
Right.
something awful just happened to you. So I try to put that in my world. It's like something awful can happen, and yet there's still some hope. There's still some way to push through. And there's characters who model that. And so readers react to that. And it's like they didn't have anything in common with Kyler or with the other characters, except this thing of like, I've experienced the darkness and somehow I pushed through, and these books meant something to me. So you're right. It's a mystical thing. It's strange. It's wonderful. I don't totally understand it. It's daunting. When readers say that, it's like, is that something special I did, or could that have been any book? And it's like,
right.
I don't know, actually. But I'm glad it was my book. So I'm going to keep doing the best I can, and lying as beautifully as I can, telling the truth through telling great lies, and doing that artfully and well.
Well, I hope you lie to me for a long, long time, Brent. The new book, Night Angel Nemesis, is available everywhere now. I have read the arc, but I am getting the audiobook and I'm gonna listen to it this weekend. I have loved all of your books in audio. It's a different experience, and I just love them. So I can't wait to dig into this
Simon
one.
Vance does a heck of a job. So
Yes,
that was a beautiful thing when he came across my books. So that was great. It's great to work with him.
absolutely. Brent, your website is brentweeks.com.
Just brentweeks.com. I'm on Facebook, and I'm actually not on Facebook a ton. Well, I sort of did in the ramp up. I'm trying to focus on the work and not on things that annoy me.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that. So I try to not be on social media very much, even though my job sometimes requires it. And you do have these like lovely little glimmers of light when you're on there, and people are wonderful. And then you have other stuff that's like, oh man, I need to not be on here. So So, I am on Facebook. I do check in every so often. I'm on Twitter. I actually just started a Discord channel, so that
nice.
So there wasn't a big behemoth that wanted to charge me every time I wanted to talk to people. So hopefully I'll start figuring out how to do that better and
Awesome.
put all my stuff there. So like if you want to come see my stuff, you could just find it in one place. That's simple. So
great.
Trying to do all those things, but yeah, otherwise I'm working on the next book, and that's my main thing. I try to keep the main thing. And I'll be writing the next one.
Excellent. We'll link all that up to make it easier for folks to find you. Brent, always a pleasure catching up. Thank you so much for taking time.
Oh, thanks so much, Hank. It's great to talk to you. Always.